Marigold was hearing voices, vague sounds, but everything seemed so far away, as if she were diving into a deep ocean. The unconsciousness that enveloped her began to dissipate little by little, revealing fragments of the outside world. She couldn't move. Her arms and legs felt trapped, heavy as lead. Opening her eyes was an impossible task, but something inside her, a spark of life, was beginning to fight to return to reality. Marigold felt the first breath of air fill her lungs, as if she were being reborn. The sound of a door opening echoed in the room. Steady footsteps entered, and she heard a familiar voice. "Still no changes," the doctor said, emotionlessly, before calling someone down the hall. Elmer entered the room. Marigold felt his presence before she heard him speak. "Doctor, is there any hope?" Elmer asked, his voice thick with calculated concern. "I don't want to give predictions," replied the doctor, shrugging his shoulders. "The case is serious." Marigold wanted to scream, to tell them that she was there, that she could hear everything. But her body didn't obey. Elmer was not alone. With him, an attractive blonde woman entered the room. Marigold didn't recognize her, but the intimacy between them was evident. The woman looked at Marigold with disdain, as if she was already waiting for her to leave. "We will stay until 6 in the afternoon, then you will have to leave," said the doctor before leaving and closing the door behind him. "I don't think she's going to survive," said the blonde woman, in an icy voice. "It's too early to say that," Elmer replied. "The operation was complicated. We need to wait a few more weeks." "Honey, I'm always right. Look at her," the woman insisted. Marigold struggled to move even one finger, to show Elmer that she was alive, that she was fighting. But nothing happened. The sounds around her became clearer. The woman's words cut into her soul. Who was she? Why did she call Elmer honey? The blonde continued, her tone light and carefree. "She has no children, no close relatives. We can start moving her things to her house." "It seems so," replied Elmer, with an enthusiasm that made Marigold's blood boil. "I always wanted to change the wallpaper in the living room. It's very dark. Once you own the house, you can do whatever you want, including getting rid of all her photos," said the woman, provocatively. "Of course. What do we need them for?" Elmer laughed, a sound that once brought Marigold comfort but now sounded hollow and treacherous. Marigold felt a tear run down her cheek. The physical pain of her condition was nothing compared to the emotional pain of hearing Elmer's betrayal. The man who promised to love and care for her in difficult times was there, planning his future with someone else, while she fought for her life. "She moved!" exclaimed the woman, alarmed. "It was just her imagination," Elmer said, approaching the bed and pinching Marigold's arm hard. She tried to react, but her body didn't respond. "It's sore. She's still unconscious," Elmer assured. "We have time." Marigold wanted to scream, wanted them to know she was there, hearing every word, but she was trapped, unable to react. Her heart was filled with a fierce determination. She would fight for what was hers, for her dignity, and for revenge. Elmer and the woman's footsteps moved away, leaving Marigold alone with her thoughts. "They went to try our bed," Marigold murmured, feeling her voice slowly return. She smiled to herself, a small victory in the midst of the chaos. She would win, and when she did, Elmer and that woman would pay dearly for their betrayal. That morning, the nurse returned to Marigold's room, with her warm smile and optimistic energy that almost seemed unattainable for someone in her situation. "Good morning, my love. Let's try one more time, okay?" said the nurse, adjusting the pillows behind Marigold, without waiting for a response. Marigold, still trapped in her body, decided that this was her first battle. She had to do something, no matter how small, to show that she was there, present and ready to fight. Today, let's focus on breathing. Inhale deeply and release slowly. This will help relax your muscles and give you strength to move, the nurse instructed, maintaining a gentle conversation. Marigold did her best to follow instructions. It was difficult. Each breath felt like a monumental effort, but she was determined not to give up. She felt tension in every part of her body, but also a spark of hope. If she could make even a little progress today, she would be one step closer to recovery. The nurse, noticing the tension, began to gently massage Marigold's arms. "This will help stimulate the muscles," she explained, her experienced hands working patiently. Marigold tried again. She took a deep breath, filling her lungs with air that seemed to renew her strength. Slowly, with an effort that seemed like moving mountains, she managed to move the fingers of her right hand. It was a small movement, almost insignificant, but for Marigold it was a gigantic triumph. "That's right. I saw. You moved," exclaimed the nurse, her eyes shining with encouragement. Her excitement was genuine, as if she had witnessed a miracle. The small victory brought new determination to Marigold. It wasn't just about moving your fingers. It was about taking back control of her life. Every muscle she regained was a piece of her autonomy that came back to her. In the days that followed, Marigold dedicated herself completely to her recovery. Each morning, she worked on moving more and more parts of her body, and each day, she made small advances. It was painful and exhausting, but she refused to give up. The only person who really seemed to care about her well-being was the nurse, Bethany. With each rehabilitation session, Bethany encouraged Marigold with her kindness and patience. She became an important ally, someone Marigold could trust to help her achieve her goals. "You're doing so well, Marigold. Don't give up, okay? I know you can do it," said Bethany, always with that encouraging smile. Marigold responded with a slight nod of her head, as much as she could manage at that moment. She was determined to show everyone, especially Elmer and his lover, that she was stronger than they ever imagined. Over time, Marigold began to form a plan in her mind. She knew she couldn't just regain her health and her independence. She needed to confront Elmer and his betrayal in a way he never expected. She needed to be careful, strategic, and most of all, she needed to protect what was rightfully hers. The sun was already starting to set, when Elmer and Hazel began to whisper in a conspiratorial tone. "We need to be careful, Elmer," Hazel said, looking at him with serious eyes. "Marigold can't even dream that we're planning all this." Elmer nodded, drumming his fingers on the table. He was nervous but determined. The desire to control Marigold's fortune consumed him with each passing day. For him, the chance to start his life over with Hazel was a dream within reach, but one that demanded a high price. "I know, Hazel, but we have to act quickly. Every day she spends in the hospital is a risk for us. We have to make it look like an accident, Elmer. Something that doesn't arouse suspicion," she said, her eyes fixed on his, without blinking. As they discussed the details of her plan, a heavy silence fell over the kitchen. It was as if they both knew how dark and dangerous the path they were about to take was, but they were determined to move forward. "I have a contact who can help us," Hazel continued, with a slight tremor in her voice, as if each word made her even more aware of the risk they were taking. "An old friend who knows people. People who can solve problems for us." Elmer looked at her, surprised and a little scared. The idea of involving third parties was a significant and dangerous step, but he knew that, alone, he would be unable to accomplish what they were planning. "You're right," Elmer finally agreed, leaning forward. "We can't do this alone. We need help to ensure everything goes according to plan." Hazel felt a shiver run down her spine upon hearing Elmer's confirmation. She knew they were committing to something that would never come back. However, The idea of seeing Marigold out of their lives and the path clear for both of them was too irresistible to give up. At the hospital, Marigold didn't know exactly what Elmer and Hazel were planning, but her instinct warned her that something was terribly wrong. Even without proof, she felt that she needed to act to protect herself and everything she had built. Over the days, as she struggled to regain movement in her legs and strengthen herself physically, her mind was equally focused on formulating a plan. She needed to figure out what was going on and make sure Elmer couldn't manipulate her. As the night deepened, Hazel picked up the phone and dialed a number she had committed to memory. She needed to contact her friend, the man who could make her plans come true. "Hello, it's Hazel," she said, when the voice on the other end answered. "I need a favor, and it's urgent." Elmer watched Hazel speak, feeling a mixture of fear and excitement. The idea that her problems could soon be solved consumed him, but it also made him uneasy. Hazel ended the call with a satisfied smile. The gears were in motion, and all they needed to do now was wait. That night, Elmer had trouble sleeping. Lying in bed next to Hazel, his thoughts were in a whirlwind. He thought about Marigold, about their life together, and about the consequences of his actions. But as much as his conscience tormented him, he knew he was trapped in her decision. The desire for a new life, free from the shadows of the past, was too strong. Early in the morning, the phone rang abruptly, breaking the tense silence that had settled in. He was Hazel's contact to confirm the evening meeting, to discuss the details and get the plan started. That afternoon, as Elmer left Hazel's house to meet the mysterious contact, Marigold had a surprise visitor at the hospital. Her brother, Hank, whom she hadn't seen in a long time, entered the room with a determined look. "Marigold!" he exclaimed, approaching the bed. Marigold was shocked to see Hank, but felt a wave of relief when she realized she wasn't alone. "Hank, what are you doing here?" Hank sat next to the bed, holding his sister's hand affectionately. "I received news of the accident and came as soon as I could. Marigold, you know you can count on me, don't you? And by the way, I brought you something." He took a letter from his coat pocket, crumpled but intact. It was a letter that Elmer had mistakenly left in his office. Marigold looked at the letter, her eyes wide with surprise. "What is that?" "I don't know exactly, but it seems important. I thought you should see it," Hank explained as he handed it to her. Marigold opened the letter with shaking hands, her emotions running high as she read. The letter was correspondence between Elmer and Hazel, discussing their plans to keep her money and possessions. With each line she read, Elmer's betrayal became clearer, and shock gave way to anger. With the letter in hand, Marigold knew she couldn't just sit around and wait for everything to work itself out. She needed to act. So she asked Hank for help. She asked him to find out exactly what Elmer and Hazel had in mind. A shocked Hank agreed to support his sister in her quest for justice. Meanwhile, Elmer met with Hazel's contact at a discreet bar in town. The man was discreet, with an air of mystery that made Elmer uncomfortable. "So, you're Elmer, right?" said the contact, lighting a cigarette with a calm hand. Elmer nodded, trying to sound more confident than he actually was. "Yes, and your name is Alex. Hazel said you could help with what we need." The man smiled, a smile that conveyed no comfort. "Certainly. All we need to do is make sure things look natural. We need you to make sure Marigold has no chance of recovering and taking over. This means keeping the pressure on her emotionally and mentally. Hazel has already taken care of the legal aspects, but we need you to stand firm."
No hesitations.
Meanwhile, at the hospital, Marigold's brother Hank was making significant progress, including finding out where Elmer and Hazel were. After a few hours of thorough research, he found some suspicious transactions in Elmer's accounts. It appeared he had withdrawn large sums of money from their joint accounts, transferring them to an unknown fund. "Marigold, I think we found something big," Hank said, staring at the laptop screen with wide eyes. "He's moving money to an offshore account. This is not good." Marigold felt a surge of fury and indignation. Not only was Elmer planning to cheat on her, but he was also trying to hide his money so she couldn't access her own resources. "He's trying to leave me with nothing, Hank. I will not allow it," Marigold said, with growing resolve in her voice. "We have to act quickly. I have a lawyer friend who can help us block these transactions. We need to act before he realizes we're after him." Marigold felt stronger every day, both physically and emotionally, and was ready to face her husband. Finally, Marigold was released and left the hospital, accompanied by Hank, determined to talk to Elmer. Hank agreed, realizing she wouldn't change her mind. "All good. I'll be by your side. Let's catch this Elmer by surprise." As Marigold and Hank drove to the house where Elmer and Hazel were temporarily staying, she couldn't help but feel a whirlwind of emotions. Love and anger mixed in her chest, and she knew that what she was about to do could change everything. It was a mixture of fear and determination that guided her that morning. "Hank, do you think I'm doing the right thing?" Marigold asked, trying to hide her insecurity. "Yes, Marigold. You deserve to know the truth. And you deserve justice for everything they did to you," Hank replied, with conviction. They arrived at the house where Elmer was temporarily living, with Hazel. Marigold took a deep breath, trying to calm her nerves. Elmer was sitting in the living room, lost in thought, when the front door abruptly opened. Marigold walked in, with Hank right behind her. Elmer stood up immediately, surprised to see his wife there. "Marigold, what are you doing here?" asked Elmer, his voice thick with apprehension. "I came to look for answers, Elmer," Marigold said, her voice firm but full of emotion. "I'm tired of lies and deceit. I want to know what's really going on." Elmer hesitated, his mind racing for words that could soften the impact of what was about to happen. He knew that Marigold was there for a reason, and that her cards were on the table. I don't know what you're talking about." Elmer tried, but his attempt sounded weak and desperate. Marigold looked into his eyes, and in that moment, she saw the man she once loved, now unrecognizable under the weight of his betrayals. "You know exactly what I'm talking about. I found your letters, Elmer. I know about Hazel. I know about the plans. Don't treat me like an idiot," challenged Marigold, crossing her arms, a gesture that hid her vulnerability. Hank, who had been watching until then, decided to intervene. "You better tell everything, Elmer. Marigold deserves to know the truth," he said firmly. Elmer closed his eyes for a moment, fighting the wave of guilt that washed over him. He opened his eyes again, now full of resignation. "Marigold, I made a terrible mistake. I got too involved with Hazel. At first, it wasn't anything serious, but things got out of hand," Elmer confessed, his voice breaking. Marigold felt her heart sink. Although she already knew the truth, hearing Elmer admit it was devastating. The words were like knives cutting into her soul. "And the money? What about offshore accounts? What did you plan to do with what is rightfully mine?" Marigold insisted, her voice firm and full of indignation. Elmer lowered his head, unable to look at the fury and pain in Marigold's eyes. "I was desperate, Marigold. I thought if I could start a new life, everything would be fine. But I didn't know how to get out of the mess I created," admitted Elmer, now truly sorry. The room was filled with a heavy silence, broken only by the sound of an old clock on the wall. Marigold realized that even with all the lies, Elmer was still the man she had loved for so many years, but now she knew that she couldn't go back. Hank touched Marigold's shoulder, a silent reminder that she wasn't alone. "You need to do what's best for you, Marigold. Not for him, not for Hazel, but for yourself," Hank whispered encouragingly. Marigold looked at Elmer, feeling a mixture of compassion and contempt. She realized she had two choices: remain stuck in a broken past or move forward and rebuild her life. "Elmer, you left me in pieces. But I won't let you destroy me. I want a divorce, and I will fight for what is mine," Marigold declared, her voice full of determination. Elmer nodded slowly, knowing there was no longer any way to fix what he had done. He had crossed a threshold from which he could not return. "I understand, Marigold, and I'm willing to give you everything you need to start over. It's the least I can do," Elmer said, resigned. With the decision made, Marigold felt a weight lift off her shoulders. It was as if she was breaking free from an invisible prison, ready to embrace the new life that awaited her. "Hank, let's get out of here. We have a lot of things to sort out," said Marigold, turning to leave. Elmer watched as she and Hank headed for the door. He knew he was losing more than just a wife. He was losing the trust of someone who loved him unconditionally. News of Marigold's divorce from Elmer spread quickly, causing shockwaves among those involved. Hazel, Alex, and had to face the consequences of their actions and deal with the new reality. Hazel was at home, trying to relax after a tiring afternoon, making coffee when she received a text from Elmer, informing her about Marigold's divorce filing. "It can't be true," Hazel muttered, looking at her cell phone with wide eyes. "She really did it." Shock quickly turned to despair. Hazel sat heavily in the chair, the coffee forgotten beside her. Her mind revolved around the idea of losing not only Elmer, but also the comfortable lifestyle she had begun to enjoy with him. She had imagined a future where everything would be perfect, but now reality was crumbling before her eyes. What disturbed her most was the fact that, with the divorce, she would have to deal with the legal and financial consequences. The money she hoped to earn no longer seemed guaranteed. "What am I going to do now?" Hazel asked herself, her voice breaking. She was in a panic, not knowing how to move forward. Judgment Day arrived, and the courtroom was filled with tension, and everyone's eyes were on Marigold and Elmer. Marigold, with renewed determination, prepared to face her traitor head-on. She had decided that the truth needed to be revealed completely, without reservation. During the trial, Marigold presented irrefutable evidence of Elmer and Hazel as accomplices in a scheme of manipulation and deception. Photos, recordings, and documents were presented, and the courtroom fell silent as each piece of the puzzle was put into place. Elmer's coolness crumbled as the case was dismantled piece by piece. Hazel, now in the dock, could not hide the despair in her eyes. After a series of testimonies and arguments, the judge handed down the sentence. Elmer was found guilty not only of his disloyal behavior in the marriage, but also of attempting to manipulate and deceive Marigold to obtain an illicit financial benefit. The sentence was harsh, reflecting the seriousness of his actions. Hazel received a reduced sentence due to her less central role and her acknowledgement of error. However, her future was uncertain, and she was forced to face the consequences of her actions. With the conclusion of the trial, Marigold was finally free from the shackles of the past. She decided to use the inheritance she received to start a new life. Instead of taking refuge in wealth, Marigold decided to open a foundation to help others who have gone through similar experiences as hers, offering emotional and legal support to those who need it. Marigold threw herself into her work with a renewed passion. The foundation became a beacon of hope for many, and Marigold found a new purpose in her life. She saw the pain she had suffered as an opportunity to do good and bring some form of justice to those fighting similar injustices. What would you have done in Marigold's place? Would you have forgiven your husband's betrayal? Stay now with another exciting story.